Here we are. Welcome to episode 3 of Dev Dialog podcast. My guest today is author, content designer, UX writer, web designer, and serial entrepreneur Melissa Geissinger. Melissa, thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here, Liz.
Yay. I've known Melissa for, 15 years maybe at this point. For a long time.
I didn't do the math before I came here today.
Maybe somewhere, but like 13 to 15 years. But
in that range, yep.
Yeah. So super great to have you here. And I've been there for a big chunk of your journey. But for everyone who is just being introduced to you today, why don't you give it to us from the start?
Sure. So let's see where to begin. So most of my career was spent as a small, either like freelance or small business owner doing web design, front-end development. I was self-taught and decided to pursue that as my career instead of using my physics degree, because my first job was when I was in college at Sonoma State University here in Northern California, and it was working for the physics department, because I was in the middle of following my first passion, which was astrophysics, and decided that I didn't want to burden the world with my horrible knack for calculus, and continued to do the web design stuff. And I got paid decently, and then I started my first company, and it just grew from there. And then I started a local community called WIMP, Web and Interactive Media Professionals, which is where Liz and I met. And then it grew from there, and until it had a hard stop at a natural disaster. And
do you want to get into that?
Yeah, I can get into that. The Tubbs fire in October of 2017 got me and burned my house down when I was 7 months pregnant with my son, who I knew at that point in time was going to be born with a severe heart defect. And so all of those things compiled into me going from, hey, I can keep working after I have the baby, no problem, to full stop, cannot take care of any of my clients, can't take care of anything but the baby, really, not even myself, for a very long period of time. So I had a long period of time where all I could do was write. And I was in the middle of writing my first novel when that happened, which was just this, little side project. And so I needed an outlet that was not real life. And so I put a lot of work and time into developing my writing. But as my son grew and he became, a lot more less dependent on me, I was able to start thinking about myself and my career again. Did a side quest as a loan originator for mortgages for a little bit, thinking that would be what I wanted to do. Oh no, that was a terrible idea. Too much paperwork. But my husband and I ended up getting separated, and this was really the onset of the pandemic. And at that point, the house was getting finished being rebuilt, and I knew that I was going to be the one to stay in the house. And so I needed to think about, how can I merge the stuff that I'm really good at with the stuff that I really like doing, with the stuff that's really going to keep me engaged. And that's when I found the career path of UX writing, also known as content design. And it's a very small little niche, and it doesn't have a lot of the same resources as UX design does. And so there's really one prominent school that you can go to get a certification from, or at least there was back then. This is a couple of years ago. And so I enrolled in a 6-month course, to get my certification in UX writing and landed my first job, which I still have today at H&R Block. Ta-da!
That's incredible. I think that the thing that has always impressed me about you is you've always seemed incredibly competent as a web developer. And I remember one time when you were like, well, I'm actually not very technical. I was shocked. I was like floored. But I've seen you take really, really what is an incredible skill that you have and apply it in so many different directions. And I think that it's great how your passion for writing. I know you're on your second novel now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and how you've taken that and all your experience in technology and have been able to dovetail together to come into this new. I mean, I think you're the first UX writer I've actually known in real life.
We do exist. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say that, I point out that I'm not technical, because I really don't think of myself as being very technical, because I really have just learned enough to get by. And I think just the advanced concepts just take so much brain power, and my neurodivergent brain can't hang on to that long enough to stay interested. And so what that's resulted in is me knowing a little bit about a lot of things. And over the course of my career, that's given me an advantage in a certain way, because I can understand enough of advanced concepts in order to digest them and distill them down into digestible ideas that have given me an edge when it comes to education. Because when I was running WIMP, I was doing a lot of education. I was teaching workshops, and I was growing my business and teaching interns and that kind of stuff. But now how that gives me an edge with UX writing is I'm able to so for those of you who don't know what UX writing is, it's the words and the microcopy that go into digital applications. So for instance, the work that I do at H&R Block, if you've ever filed your taxes online, and the words that you read when you're going through that digital process those words are written by a content designer or UX writer. And so, for example, I mean, taxes is something that, it's a very complex topic. And so you need to learn about a lot of those concepts and a lot of those rules and the IRS stuff. And then you ask the question, okay, what does the user need to know in this circumstance? What is the most vital information? And then you distill it down, and then you give access points for getting in, deeper into the weeds and learning more about those things, or using data-driven tactics to understand what users might be confused about at that point in time, and giving them options for how to get answers.
I'm curious what that looks like in terms of collaborating with a team. Like, do you work alongside a UX designer? Do you work alongside developers as a product is coming together? And what does the collaboration look like?
Yeah, the collaboration is constant. So we work in sprints. So we work in 3-week-long sprints, and being that the designers outnumber the UX writers about 2 to 1, we don't always work with the same designers, but we have a core team, so for every project that we work on, or every ticket that we work on, we are partnered with a designer and a product manager, and that's the core team. And then whatever we're working on ends up determining what other partners we pull into that. The developer, the legal's always
Mm-hmm.
standing like a dark shadow over your shoulder, be like, you can't say that.
No.
And yeah, just research. Research is another, we've got a small research team that we go to whenever we want to work with, partner with them to do certain, um, you know, studies or tap into their database full of knowledge. So it's a big, happy collaborative family.
That sounds really cool. I'm also curious how this works into other forms of writing, technical writing, in terms of both like content and copy.
Yeah, most of what I do is microcopy on a day-to-day basis, but I did mention help articles. So I actually do also write help articles associated with the DIY product as well. And so that brings in sort of the more technical writing aspect. So what I learn about a concept is usually a lot more than what I put onto the screen, so to speak. So it takes some working and it takes some passes by. You run it by the product expert, and you run it by the tax expert, and you run it by the legal, and you end up with the final product that the user sees.
Do you ever cross paths with marketing copywriters?
Yes, we're technically on the same we're in the same department.
Okay.
But we don't interface like on a day-to-day basis, but maybe like on a monthly basis to make sure that we're all aware of what we're both doing. And it does take some work to make sure that we're essentially speaking the same language, which tends to be a lot of acronyms.
Mm,
But it is fun. It is fun. I like that I'm associated with marketing, but not working on marketing copy, because I don't enjoy that as much.
right. I mean, I can relate to that for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what are you working on now that's really exciting to you?
I have been dabbling with AI systems, and that translates to large language models, AI help, and that kind of thing. And the way that a UX writer is involved in working with AI systems is we get to decide how, essentially, like what's the voice of the AI system, and how do we phrase certain questions, and how do we compile the information and give the user choices in order to interact with it. So every touch point that the user has with the AI, that's not the AI generated text itself and the response, is something that we are associated with. And so gosh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mute my phone.
No worries, I didn't hear it. I hope you didn't just hear my dryer buzz.
No, I didn't.
Okay, good.
But anyway, yeah, I've been taking a course from the UX Writing Hub for AI design, and it's been really, really interesting to look into, really delve into what goes into what. Oh my, that's a sentence. Yeah, developing the LLMs, and so that's something that I'm really looking forward to getting more into in the future.
So what you're saying is like right now you're working on like user facing micro copy in order to help the user use the AI, and where you're going with it is actually being a part of training the AI.
Yeah, it's not the training of the AI itself. It's actually, at this point, because LLMs are so new, it's how do we give the AI a voice at initial contact in order to have the user engage with them, to write the appropriate prompts that are going to give the answer that they're looking for. Because really what people are used to is interfacing with search engines, right? So if they go to
Mhm.
Google, they can type something in, just a statement, right? A blank statement like hockey scores, something like that. But that's not how we want people to engage with an AI. AI is more like, okay, talk to them like a person. And
Mhm.
so just simply by changing um, the what we prompt the user to with. So say it's we have two sentences, right? So say we have one that says ask a question, and option 2 would be ask me a question. Just
Mm.
those two subtle differences would result in theory, the user treating it like a search engine versus talking to it like an individual.
I see. That's really cool. So it sounds like it's drawing a lot on human psychology as well as technical innovation.
Mhm. Which is funny, it's so cyclical because if we go back to the early days of the internet before we had Google, we had Ask Jeeves.
I remember Ask Jeeves.
Remember, where the user was prompted to ask a question, and so we've kind of come full circle. It's kind of interesting to think about that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah. Interesting. I wonder if we'll end up back at like something more like Google, but the whatever comes after our current AI situation.
Situation.
Well, I mean, I guess so. My next question is always like, how are you feeling about the current state of the industry? So, usually, at least in the conversations I've had recently, that often is around the current AI situation.
Yeah, I mean, it is a situation, but it's not anything that we really have control over. So my analytical brain is like, well, the feelings are irrelevant. So I'm just going to learn as much as I can in order to use the technology that is here with us to stay, whether we like it or not, and use it in smart and thoughtful ways in order to make the world better. Question
Mhm.
mark shrug.
I love the question mark shrug. Yes, I'm right there with you. I think as it was just starting to emerge a couple years ago, my mindset was that I wanted to interact as much as possible in order to um, really be a part of teaching this new technology empathy. Like that was super important to me because I noticed that like a lot of the early media like articles surrounding AI were about how um, we let it loose on the internet and now it's racist, things of that nature. So I really wanted to be a part of like uh, countermeasures in order to make a good person out of the AI.
Yeah.
But as it's become more mainstream and more in use, I'm seeing how it really is, it's not intelligence the way we would define it. It really is just a series of computations like anything else, right? So
Mhm.
it's just taking in information and regurgitating it back, granted, much faster than humans possibly can. But eventually, at least in theory, it's going to actually be intelligent and actually capable of generating new ideas.
Well, I actually use it. I use ChatGPT a lot in my fiction writing, especially my science fiction, and I don't use it the way that everyone is kind of afraid that writers use AI, which is to generate entire narratives and
Mm.
and works of fiction all on its own. I treat it like an assistant. I treat it like a tool. Um, and so I take to it, concepts like, hey, I have these ideas. And then I ask it to like do heavy computational research and things like that. And it's really handy. It's
Mhm.
things that if I were to try and do it on my own, it would take months of research and combing through resources and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's great as a tool for like shortcuts of that nature. I think anything that helps us springboard to actual creativity rather than a replacement for creativity is a good use of it. And I'm very happy to be involved in conversations where I'm hearing about its application in different industries. And I think for each industry, there's both like a fear that it's going to replace the human element of doing a thing, and a, a camp that's like actually it's actually very helpful to leverage us to do this better.
Yeah, I think there's two different sides of it. I think there's a person's direct interaction with AI, and the worry that, you know, ethics will just get thrown to the side. And I say I would have no fear in that regard, because as long as you stay ethical and stay curious, you're good. But then there is the job side and the corporate side, and certain leaders and you know, in the industry now taking the approach that AI is a job replacement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that kind of makes me uneasy. You know, am I worried for my own job? No, not really, because technology is not there yet. And I happen to think that the leaders at my company are a lot smarter than
Mm.
tech companies to know that people can't be replaced at that level. Um, but it is something that, you know, we need to pay attention to, and the people in power need to be cognizant of, and really understand that people are more important than machines.
I think that's a good way to put it. I hope that people will take heed of that message. I don't know that. Well, I feel like at this point, anybody who's greedy enough to try to replace their human components with AI, like in terms of development or content writing or any number of disciplines where people have taken their lives to hone a craft. I think those companies are going to be very sorry if they try to make that leap with the current state of things.
Liz, that sounded like a threat.
Well, not like I'm going to do something about it. I'm just saying it's not going to work out too well.
Let it be known.
um, although I did have a very interesting conversation recently with somebody who proposed basically poisoning the training data by pushing a bunch of bad code to GitHub for AI to consume. But
That's one option.
that's a way to go about it. But I also know a life coach who suggests, you know, using it as a sounding board to get really clear about your goals and ambitions, and like what you want out of, if you're unclear about the next chapter of your life, like, you know, it's nice to have a sounding board that can help with those things. And I found like at least Chat GPT and the other one that just came out more recently, I forget, but it's still like a text based. They're pretty compassionate as far as like if you go to them seeking any kind of like support, they're fairly supportive.
Yeah, they do tend to lean into empathy and validation as like the default, which is good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They have to be actively manipulated in order to go down, you know, the Terminator route.
Yeah. Really, you have to try really hard. I've seen evidence of it, and I think every time somebody is successful in in making that happen, um, it also helps the developers of the large language models work harder to put in barriers against it happening. But there are still going to be people who want to just want instructions on how to watch the world burn, I guess. And they will, like, the same people who wonder what happens to a sim if you put it in an empty room with no toilet and no windows. But
yeah, it's the Sid from Toy Story.
right, exactly. Yeah. But maybe, I mean, we can just call them min-maxers, though, if we want to take the element of judgment out of it and think of, like, it's just an intellectual curiosity.
Right. Yes. Harmless testing.
just seeing how far we can make this experiment go. And I guess that's
Yeah.
all life is, really.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm one to talk. I mean, when you write books, you kill fictional people, so you're always like, oh, I get
That's
caught. I
true.
mean, if anybody would look at my Google history, yep, it's interesting.
Oh no.
Would a person die if they fell off of a cliff 20 feet? Oh, wait, I need to make the cliff taller. Okay.
Oh. That's funny. What are you excited about for the future?
Oh my goodness. That's a good question. I I recently picked up a role as the technology director for the San Francisco Writers Conference, in my copious free time.
That's amazing, though.
And yeah, and I'm so excited because it's going to give me an opportunity to redesign the website with my new uh mind for content design, and be able to integrate some more advanced technologies and really consider the user data that we've gathered through surveys and just do the whole thing. And so it's going to be a great example, and I want to document the process as well, to really just build a website rebuild a website from the ground up. And yeah, I'm very excited about that. And then integrating some AI tools that I've been working on the side as well.
Well, that's
Yeah.
exciting. How has your process of redesigning a website changed over the years?
I would say that it's really evolved because I know how to properly integrate data into the process. And I came from a world of building very small websites for very small audiences. And so this is a bit of a larger beast. I've worked on larger projects too, but um, I like that I have now a lot more experience working with massive audiences, like it, from H&R Block, and know how to properly survey people, ask the right questions, and then do research beyond what I normally do or what I've done in the past, such as conversation mining is a tool that I use. So going around to different resources and locations on the internet, social media, and that kind of thing, see what people are saying about using the website or using the different tools provided by the organization, and having that play into decisions that are made on how we reorganize information and build in a specific, language or microcopy, even, in order to guide people through an experience and make it easier for them to find what they're looking for.
Sounds like it's a really user-first approach. And now that you have a lot more users, that it's working out
Yeah, I like that. So I'm an immediate gratification type of person, and as much as I love working on the H&R Block product, it takes a while, and you can't. Odds are you can't even see the results on what you're working on for about another year because you got to wait for the next tax season, and there's usually like a handful of users that have access to the new thing that you're working on, and then you got to see how they react to that, and then yeah.
Mhm.
So it's so many steps and so much time goes in between those things that you I mean, my brain can't hang on to that information for an extended period of time. So at the point in time you get your results, so much time has gone by. You're like, wait a minute, what did I do again? So yeah, the shorter lifespan projects are good for me because it allows me to have that immediate results, the immediate feedback and data tracking and the follow-up and all the things involved in the whole product design uh, circle of life.
I can definitely relate to that. I want to make a change and get the results and iterate from there as quickly as possible rather than, because same as if I build an entire product and ship it and then I don't get feedback for even as long as a couple weeks, it could be a big enough gap where I'm like, I sorry, I moved on. I'm working on something else now. so so
Yeah,
I
so
get
it'll be
that.
good, I'm excited about what I'm going to learn from that experience, and then take it back to everything else that I work on to just make me a better writer.
So how does what you're doing with the content writing and UX writing, how does that influence or does it influence your creative writing or your more, your novels?
It's interesting actually because they're two different completely different kinds of writing. So it's a different energy. So I can go from the day job into my creative writing in the same day without feeling overly taxed or overly exhausted.
Mm.
Um, but they do overlap in a way where when you're doing UX writing, oftentimes you have to find the best way to phrase something or deliver instructions, deliver an idea with the least amount of words possible. So while it maybe doesn't come into effect so much when you're writing the first draft of a novel, it comes into play when you're in editing mode and you're
Mm.
trying to compress long sentences or that kind of thing. And so that's where my UX brain kind of comes into play. It also comes into play when I'm working on marketing, as the dirty M word,
Mm.
the marketing side and the promotion side for my writing, because I do wear all the hats in that situation, and so I do need to do the self promotion there, and so coming up with taglines for email newsletters and that kind of thing. That's also all the same little family.
If you knew somebody who was wanting to pivot from a more technical engineering role into more of a writing role, what would be your advice to them?
There are a lot of resources out there. I would say the first place that you should go is uxwritinghub.com. That is where I took my certification course, the UX Writing Academy. But they have some courses there that are free that you can try out to see like what it's like. And there's a blog there that I've contributed to over time as well that has a lot of great information and resources. And one of them actually is a a story of how I got my start and essentially went from a student to a full-time senior in 9 months. So I think the article itself is like how I got the contract position. So that was 6 months in between deciding I was going to be a UX writer and getting my first job with 6 figures.
Well, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And if you have show notes, I can give you a link to that direct article.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to have that. I mean, yes, I do have show notes. What about somebody who's wanting to write their first novel?
Ooh, writing the first novel. Okay, so, well, it depends. I mean, if you are thinking, hey, I want to be a writer, now I just have to wait for an idea, then I don't really know how to help you because my problem is like I have 1,000 ideas for stories. I never wanted to be a writer when I was little. That was never like an idea that I had, a passion. You know, you always talk to authors and they're like, oh, yes, the time I could read my first word, I knew that I wanted to write a book and all this. That wasn't me. I got basically broadsided by this story that just like I had in my bones and in my dreams, and I just had to get it out. And I just learned along the way. And that is the advice I have. If you've got a story in you, just write it down. It's a process. And if you have the resources to do so, find a writing coach. That's the best thing that I did. I ended up meeting this guy at a party, and he was an author, and I was like, hey, I'm writing a book. And he's like, hey, I do coaching. And he gave me some really great tips, really basic stuff that, now I look back, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that at that point, which is like, for example, show, don't tell. If you're writing a scene, just don't explain everything. Just have it in action to keep the the reader engaged. Wow. Yeah, when you do an interview, it's like all the things at once. Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a story, just write it, and then you'll figure it out along the way. And join communities, Facebook, wherever you are. TikTok is so great for writers.
Amazing. Yeah, I wouldn't have. Well, I'm not on TikTok, so I'm not sure. Like, I thought it was all like teenagers doing dances and stuff, but
oh no.
It sounds like every community has a corner of TikTok where there can be good resources to be found.
Yep, it's wonderful.
Glad to hear it. maybe I had it for a brief moment. I might sign up again.
Yeah, TikTok has a lot of stigma with it, but gosh, I wasn't expecting it to impact my life as much as it did. Because of TikTok, I realized that I'm autistic, and I didn't just realize that I am autistic. I learned how to deal with it. I learned how to cope with it. I learned how to understand how I work and not be ashamed of it. And it's just been this whole emotional journey. And then the other side of TikTok, I've learned how to like homestead and build my own like well in my back 40. Not that I have that, but one day maybe.
Oh, that's incredible.
I mean, it's yeah, there's just everything you can imagine. And it's a really positive community and positive experience. I mean, I was flipping through it earlier while I was making some toast for breakfast, and I came across someone doing a live lesson on quantum mechanics, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I just watched a quantum mechanics lesson with the Schrodinger equation during my breakfast.
That's really cool. Okay, I definitely will give it another shot. And
More
I think
than teenagers dancing.
It's like anything else. You get what you get what you show interest in. So if you're interested in toxic things, you're going to have a toxic feed, right? But
I
if
think,
you,
yeah,
yeah,
I think that's a general rule for life as a
yeah.
whole. You see it manifested in social media, but you also see it in life. If you are genuinely a positive, curious person, then you're going to get that back.
Well, hopefully this podcast ends up being for those generally curious and positive people. And I think for sure this episode is. And I wondered if you want to talk about, you're writing your second novel right now, right?
Yeah.
You want to tell us about it?
Oh, sure. So I'm actually sort of toggling back and forth between a couple different writing projects right now. One of them that I alluded to before is a science fiction, and it's called Quantum Butterfly Project. And it's this, I don't have the elevator pitch down yet because it's really in the early stages, but it actually evolved from an experimental project that I did back in 2020 when the world was falling apart. And I really wanted to inject some positivity into the world. And so I did this little experiment where I wrote a sci-fi narrative where it was like an email chain thing where if you sign up, you'll get an email automatically sent to you, and it acts as if it's coming from the future, right? So it uses like a tachyonic anti-telephone device in order to deliver you a message, and it says, hey, you need to do certain actions in order to make sure that the world becomes a better place. And it's sort of just this butterfly effect message that the user oh my god, I need to stop saying that. The person who's interacting with this is tasked with just one of the assignments is the next time you're walking down the street, smile at somebody, and when somebody smiles at you, your instinct is to smile back, and that just creates this ripple effect of positivity. And so it started out with that and then ended up going down to super evil organization is trying to threaten all the things. But it was cool because it put the the reader in the driver's seat of taking action via social media, just putting all kinds of positive things into the world. And so that evolved over time because I was like, well, what if this could be a narrative to a novel? And I expanded it to include like an entire list of cast of characters that I'm calling the Watershed Syndicate that are getting tasks from the future and have to go and run around and complete these missions to make the world a better place. But are they really, that kind of thing?
That's exciting.
And yeah.
Literally just got goosebumps from your the Watershed Syndicate is what did it.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
nailed
It's
it.
gonna be
All
so
right.
cool.
Yeah, so when I'm not working on that, I'm actually working on writing a memoir. For those that think that memoir means autobiography, it's not like a boring like this is the story of my life from A to Z. I really want to tell the story of my experience in going through the fires and dealing with my son's health stuff and really the resilience needed in order to come out of that. And I asked the question, is resilience something that you're born with, or is it something that can be built? And so that's a very serious thing, and so I like the fact that I can go from serious to happy-go-lucky sci-fi world.
Yeah, it sounds like they balance each other. It sounds like the memoir is really important, but also I imagine very maybe emotionally taxing.
Yep.
To relive all that and digest it and put it out there. Hopefully it's also a healing experience too.
That's the plan.
um I can't wait. I can't wait to read that. But I'm glad that you're also working on a fun science fiction book, and that sounds super like a fun read, and I'm looking forward to that as well.
I love that that I can tell my parents that I finally sort of get to use my physics degree for something.
I'm sure it informs a lot of the yeah, it's going to be great. I know it is. And it sounds kind of YA? Would that be, is that accurate?
It's got elements of YA, yes, because
Okay.
yeah, the main character is although she's a like on the younger side of a millennial, we do get to see her life earlier. So
Okay. Cool. No, that actually sounds great. Like I was wondering if it was something, I would share with my kids if they're starting to get more into reading, but I know
possibly if
I
you are
personally
okay
am
with
going
them
to.
reading swear words, because
Oh,
there's a lot of F-bombs.
okay. Good to know. I definitely am okay with that.
But
I
my
have,
first book though is YA.
is it?
Yes, very kid
That's
friendly.
nothing left but
Dust.
ash dust. Dust. Yeah. I think I have a digital copy of that.
Yeah, it's
But
historical fiction. Yeah, about the 1906 earthquake and fires, and so that's really a survival story. That's also coming of age. You got a little bit of romance. You got a little bit of a dastardly, tropey bad guy, and it's fun. It's a fun read, but you also get to learn a lot about the history of San Francisco and the Victorian era, right before and during the earthquake. Lots of research associated with that too, and I loved every bit of it.
I've seen a lot of your social media. You're doing book signings recently.
Yeah.
So that's really
Yeah.
cool.
It's fun. Man, it is a trip to do a signing at a Barnes and Noble. It's like, oh my gosh, I made it. Not
Do
financially, but
you get a good turnout
it was
from
pretty
people who've read it?
good.
That's
Yeah.
good.
There was a lot of people who, were just shopping at Barnes and Noble that happened upon my table and were engaged with it. Because I have a design background, I was able to do my own cover art, and I think I nailed it. I mean, I don't mean to toot my own horn or anything, but I really do. Because there was one girl who saw it, and it was like she just got quiet and just started smiling, and then she picked it up and she's like, okay, I'm gonna buy it. And I signed it for her, and then when she was walking away, she hugged it to her chest.
Oh.
And that was so cool. Oh my gosh. And then I had sold a copy of the book a month previous to an individual in one of my writing groups, and he showed up with his husband, and he had transformed from a colleague, fellow writer, into a fan. It was the coolest. He hung out for probably for like an hour asking me all kinds of different questions about the process, and how I made this decision and what I did with that. And yeah, it was awesome.
That's so cool. I'm actually curious about your process too. Like with the what you're writing now, you said you're very early on in the process, and I'm wondering, like, with your first draft, do you just sort of get into it and let the prose flow until it's finished, or do you write a skeleton of the story first and then where do you go from there?
Yeah, in the writing world, we call those two different camps plotter or pantser. I don't know where the term pantser came from, but it's a thing. And it's what Stephen King does. Stephen King is sort of like a notorious pantser, which means he just writes from beginning to end. Being that I have a very analytical brain and technical background, I'm comfortable with a framework. So, that being said, writing historical fiction and science fiction, for example, two completely different things.
Mm.
You throw memoir into the mix and it's also like, oh my God, what am I doing to myself? There's no consistency here. But I think the one thing that has in common with, I like to have a framework to work around. With historical fiction, it was easy. It was the bones of the actual historical event and the world that existed in 1906 San Francisco at that time. And I had maps galore that I worked with, and maps that outlined the path that the fire moved along, and so I was easily able to craft a narrative around those bones. With sci-fi, it's world building, right? And so it's a lot of, I get to make it up as I go, but I need to have a solid framework of like, how does the science work? How, what are the characters built as, like, and really build out those characters and their backgrounds in order to fully understand what their motivations are going to be in every scenario. And so maybe you don't know what's going to happen from like page to page, but I've got the goalposts, so to speak,
Mm-hmm,
the tent
mm-hmm,
poles set up
mm-hmm.
so that I can build around that structure.
That makes a lot of sense. But and then for the memoir, I suppose the framework is because it's actual events from your
You
life.
know, that one is tricky. I think it's probably the hardest one because I'm trying to figure out how to translate real life events into a narrative and transform myself into a character in a
Hmm.
book. And that is harder for me to figure out because, I want to try and have everything be accurate, but I don't want to have unnecessary information, and figuring out how to weave that into like a narrative with, character arcs and story arcs is difficult. So I'm still working on that.
I see. And so where in your writers group have you identified maybe a mentor or a certain, I don't know, body of resources you can go to for that specific problem?
Yeah, I'm kind of still working on that with the memoir stuff. I have some great writers groups that I'm a part of. I'm part of a local one here called Redwood Writers here in Santa Rosa, and I've got another group that's sort of like myself and three other individuals who are all sort of more or less in the same point in our writing careers, and it's more of like a accountability
Mm.
and friendship circle. We just got back from doing a writer's retreat, and we live in all different parts of the continent, and so we assembled in Bainbridge Island near Seattle
Oh, wow.
for like a 5-day long retreat for us to just be able to focus on our work together and all that kind of thing. But as far as like a mentor, it's something that I still really want to have, but I haven't really established yet.
Gotcha. Well, I hope that you find that, but I know that, I mean, I'm sure it's going to work out great regardless.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm not a writer, so I'm just kind of talking out of my ass here, but it sounds like you're asking all the right questions in order to make it turn out, to be a really compelling read.
Thank
So I'm,
you.
I'm excited for that. And I'm also like very glad that you're still within like a technology realm. You're still very much like hands-on with being a part of developing an app that probably millions with H&R Block
Yep.
people use.
Hmm.
And it's been such a cool ride to watch your career unfold and take all these different facets, because I think it's really inspiring that, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into one type of thing. You can follow your passions and find success in a lot of different avenues.
Thanks so much, Liz. It's
You're
been a
welcome.
ride.
And it's not over yet. But I hope that it's smooth and fun.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I think that's about it.
Well, we went over a lot of ground, so I'll let you go get into the rest of your day. And I really can't thank you enough for being here and being a part of this. I'm looking forward to this episode
This has been
going out.
fun. Great podcast. I hope it takes off.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear it.
Hey, listeners, tell your friends.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.